Yo, 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 what's up?
What's going
So,
on?
so excited to chat. Again, Jojo, thanks for being super flexible. Recently moved to Mexico. As you saw, I just had a quick background change. So things are kind of hectic. How are things going on your side today?
Good, busy man. Just came back from a Pocket Gamer Connect conference in London, which was fantastic. Followed by a trip to our lead investor, Merit Circle in Portugal, which was also really fun. But it was a lot of traveling in a very short period of time. So, just recovering a little bit this week and ready to be back at my home desk, with everything installed rather than my laptop. But it's all right.
No, I totally get you. Well, before we start, I want to quickly welcome everybody to the Web3 Gaming Show. We're here to uncover the world of Web3 gaming and hear from the people who are creating and pioneering this future. We're exploring the stories of game developers, community builders, content creators, and industry experts. And please join us as we dive into the ever-growing Web3 gaming space and learn more about the movers and shakers of this very exciting space that is still very early. And on our second episode of the Web3 Gaming Show, I'm excited to talk to Jojo. I met Jojo about a year ago, reaching out to individuals through a networking grind on LinkedIn, and we've kind of stayed in touch since then and have created a relationship, which I'm, again, super appreciative of. First of all, I want to learn, Jojo, like, what is your Web3 story, and ultimately, how did you end up in blockchain gaming?
That's a good question. I won't give you the long story because that'll pretty much take most of the interview. But it really boils down to, I've been involved in the blockchain world since 2016. Started out as a degenerate crypto trader, like most people do. But then you go down the rabbit hole of, decentralization, the money printer, the gold standard, etc. And then, at one point it just clicked, and I realized that this is the new future of finance that we're building.
Mm,
But it wasn't until 2021 when I heard about play to earn gaming that it really perked my interest. I'd been following NFTs for a while and seeing them applied in this way, where all of a sudden people were earning money by playing games, and your digital assets were really owned by the players. I mean, it really made sense to me. So
yeah.
I went down another rabbit hole of play to earn games at the time, played Axie Infinity, Crypto Cars, and then it got really weird, and I started playing this game called Baby Swap. Like there was some really weird play to earn games, and I quickly realized two things. One, there was not much gamified going on. There weren't fun games, and two. The economics didn't seem to make sense because everybody around me was making lots of money and everyone was just like posting about ROIs and how much money they're making. And it felt like they'd lost the concept of gaming along the way. And because I realized back then quite quickly that these were all pretty much Ponzi schemes, and that was going to go really wrong at some point, we felt like we had a golden opportunity to create, to start working on the next generation of Web3 gaming that does use the strengths of blockchain in gaming, but finding a way to solve that kind of inherent unsustainability of opening up a game economy, which has never been done before to this degree.
I mean, I totally agree. When I first met you, you were like really, really against guilds and
Yeah.
scholars. What is like your updated thoughts on this?
Well, because way back when we first met, it was like the height of the guild scholar craze, and everybody was out there making money, saying that this is the future, and people in developing countries are going to be able to give up their jobs and play games for a living. But that was such, excuse my French, bullshit. And I told you at the time, like that does not work nowadays. And we had this discussion back then because I think you were working with or for a guild or had your own guild, and
Correct.
you were kind of asking me like, hey, what should guilds be doing? And I said at the time that guilds will need to adapt, and they will need to use the player bases and their communities that they've built up quite eloquently and kind of re-energize and refocus them to provide more value. And kind of that's what I'm seeing very recently. You're seeing all these guilds pivoting to provide playtesting as a service, or community marketing as a service. So it's interesting to see them all kind of pivot away. I'm just hoping that they become more sustainable and that the contribution and distribution of funds that are earned are shared fairly among the people doing the grunt of the work.
Right. Which kind of leads us. I mean, we can discuss this more further later on because I would love to, but would love to learn a little bit more about Castle of Blackwater, how you're thinking about the game and then obviously the back end economy as well, and possibly kind of sprinkle in your thoughts on what it means to be a value injector. What does it mean to be a value extractor? I think you have, in my opinion, one of the most pioneering thoughts in the space of how we can actually use this technology for the betterment of gaming rather than just for the extraction of financial gain, which excites me a lot.
Yeah, and we're going to have to separate the conversation between gameplay focus and economical focus just because they're two huge topics and I don't want to intertwine and be talking for like 20 minutes.
Right.
Would you like me to focus on gameplay first, or should we dive straight into economics?
Let's go into gameplay, because I think in general Web3 gaming should be gameplay first, and then we can talk a little bit more about how you think about the back end.
Sure. Is there any way, how do I share my screen here? Oh, there's a button.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll kind of explain the game while giving a little playthrough of our demo.
Cool.
Let me just turn the volume down here. Okay. My screen is frozen, my webcam, but you can now see my screen, I'm guessing, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Perfect. Right. So Castle of Blackwater is a 2D deduction game. And a good example is a game like Among Us, for example. And we used to play Among Us back in the day, just like a lot of people did. But Among Us was unable to kind of hold on to that hype cycle that they experienced because it's a very repetitive game. It's very simple when you go down to the core. But what Among Us really social deduction genre is that freedom of movement, doing tasks, the excitement of kind of running away from a player that you think is the killer. That was relatively new in the social deduction genre. So what we did is we took that element, but then we also took elements from more strategic social deduction games like Town of Salem, like Werewolf, and we kind of mashed the two together to create Castle of Blackwater, which takes place in a magical castle. There's a whole backstory. We've written a whole book about the lore and etc. But the short version is that this castle, it has this unique challenge, and anywhere between 7 to 15 players take part in this challenge. And the majority of the players will belong to the Protector faction. The Protectors are the good guys. Their objective is to move around the castle and solve tasks, just like in Among Us. Only our tasks are a little bit more skill games rather than just point and clicks. So right now I'm a Protector character. I have to use my abilities. That's kind of new, by the way. Every character that you can play has abilities. So I go to this book and I pick up a task. For example, Vegetable Ninja. I'll go and follow this little arrow that takes me to the task, and then I'll complete it. And that's how I get XP, right? And if our team gets enough XP, we get to escape the castle, we win the game. Here's an example of how that works. So it's a little bit more hyper casual games, like I mentioned. So here you're literally playing Fruit Ninja for a while. So that's the majority of the players. They're doing these tasks, just trying to get enough points. Then we have the Satanic. They're the evil characters, and there's only like 1 or 2, maximum 3, depending on how many players are in there. And the Satanic are pretending to do tasks, but secretly when they get the chance, they have a kill ability. They will, kill the good guys and try and get away with it, just like in Among Us. Their objective is to eliminate everyone, and when they win, when they kill everyone, then they win the game. Here you can see the XP bar. Right now it's 0 out of 60. Had I just completed that challenge, it would have gone 10 out of 60. The more players there are, the more XP you need to get. Then we have a third faction. They are called the Forgotten faction, and they kind of play their own individualistic game. They'll get a special challenge depending on the character that they have, and they can win or lose their own game independently of what Protectors versus Satanic is playing. That kind of adds an extra level of chaos. Then we have cycles. So right now we're in the day cycle where we have increased visibility. Everything's a lot safer. And in a minute we go into the night cycle. And during the night cycle, I have 2 options. Either I stay in the castle where there's reduced visibility, I'm more likely to get killed, but I also get bonus XP if I do tasks. Or I can hide away into the safe zone. And the safe zone is like you just saw the switch to darkness.
Right.
And if a player isn't within this little circle, I can't see them. So it's quite dangerous. The safe zone is one of these floors that you have to access through here. I can't access it now because the door just locked, but it's like a whole extra zone where I can't get killed, but I also can't do any tasks. And the reason we've kind of divided that up is because in Among Us, one of the frustrations that we had is that you spend the daytime just walking around, seeing stuff. But if you see something, you can't really talk about it. Then you go into the voting round and suddenly you have 15 people all talking at once. Like, I saw this, I saw that. What we're trying to do is during this night cycle, we have this zone where people aren't necessarily doing tasks, but they are communicating. And instead of 15 people arguing over each other, you have people forming these little cliques and these little groups trying to discuss their suspicions. We're going to have magic mirrors that connect the castle floor to the top floor. There's a whole spiel. And then at the end of this night cycle, which will happen in a minute, we have a voting round. It's a very forced voting round. So there's still body reporting. We're doing all that, but we're limiting the voting rounds to once per full kind of cycle, just to make sure that there's more structure to the game and there's less chaos in that sense. Here you can see some of the rooms that we're working on. This is the library, of course. Here you can also see the weathering system that we recently implemented, where you can see some rain and stuff. This is the church. These are all custom designed assets by our artist. His name's Alfie. He's got a really beautiful art style, and he tries to use our kind of IP and memorabilia. So this is the voting round. This is where, I'm by myself. So there's not much to vote on, but this is where I would vote on other people. For now, I can choose to skip voting, and I'll show you one more task, and then the game will automatically end because I'm playing by myself. But a fun one, or one that I like the look of, is ingredient grab. It's telling me to find the right ingredients, right? So I go and follow the arrow. It tells me to go here. Are you good at memory, Juan? Do you have a good memory?
I want to say yes, but I'm afraid no.
Right. Remember these things. Remember these things for me, right? Asparagus, octopus, broccoli, and carrot.
Asparagus, octopus, broccoli, carrot.
You got it?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Now tell me, what was it?
Asparagus, octopus, lettuce, carrot.
Lettuce?
Broccoli.
It was broccoli, yeah. All right. So now we just completed the task, and the game's going to end because I'm by myself, so it triggers the win condition. But that's the core of the game. It's played with 7 to 15 players, and I didn't really get to showcase all of the abilities. Every character has their own abilities. Some of them are more geared towards solving murders and mysteries. The other ones make you more efficient at solving tasks, etc., etc. And yeah, it's every time you play, there's a unique character, unique play style. So we think that really improves the replayability of the game as well.
That's great, and I love how everything's kind of fleshed out already. You obviously have something that is tangible that people can play and ultimately get a sense of what the game is. How would you say you are implementing Web3 into this, and why does it make your game better?
So one of the things that we learned quickly along the way is that the average gamer sentiment towards Web3 and NFTs is not great right now. So if you release a game currently in the current condition that is only Web3 focused, then you're only going to attract Web3 gamers. And by definition, currently Web3 gamers are more inclined to be value extractors, right? Because the whole nature of Web3 gaming has been about ROI, earning, etc. So that's not a good idea in our opinion. What we're doing is we're releasing this game as a Web2 game first, and making sure that as a Web2 game, it is successful. Because if a Web2 game is successful and you can get that initial player base of value injectors, people who spend money in your game to increase their game experience, then we know there's much less risk to open up that economy and to kind of go for that next phase. So initially it'll be a Web2 economy with gold and crystals, and then we'll balance the game, we'll grow the player base. And once that's been successful and the Web2 game is kind of stable and we're breaking even on that, that's when we'll introduce a ranked, more competitive game mode, right? So everything in Web2 takes place in a casual setting. You can play with friends, party up, etc. And once you get good at the game, we're going to give you the opportunity to play ranked competitive. Now, I've never heard of a game doing competitive social deduction, so we're kind of being the first in that as well. But we really want you to be able to put your deceptive skills to the test. And then we have this, copy of the casual, but then it becomes ranked. And we have this whole Web3 economy based on a dual token economy that uses some really innovative ways of ensuring sustainability of the utility token. And that's something that most Web3 games have struggled with so far.
Right. Are you referring specifically to your AMM white paper, essentially?
Yeah, in this case, I am, yeah.
Cool. I think you said a lot there that I can dive into. I think first of all, I want to know like what has been your experience developing a blockchain game, like pretty much from the ground up.
My experience has been is that it's a lot more like developing a Web2 game, because in the core, right, the first pillar that every Web3 game developer has to have is that the game has to be fun. And the adding of blockchain doesn't necessarily add that base layer of fun, right? You don't need blockchain to create a fun game. Blockchain helps you create engagement with a game that's already fun, but blockchain will not make a not fun game fun, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So initially we learned, we come from a blockchain and app web development background, no previous experience in game development. So the first thing I learned is that I didn't know a lot about actual game development. And I've spent the last year, absolutely absorbing literature, videos, documentaries, learning everything there is to learn about your Web2 game development, so that we can kind of apply that knowledge and then add on the extra layers of Web3 knowledge that we have from coming from that blockchain background.
I like that a lot. I think that mentality speaks to how you build your game, and therefore obviously how you build your user base, your gamer base, which is very different from what we're seeing today. There's one thing that you said that I've thought about a little bit and would love to hear your extended thoughts on this, which is, do you think that blockchain and Web3 will be best utilized for competitive play, specifically outside of a casual gameplay for most games, as it inherently has this like rank system to it, especially if we're talking about like rarities?
I don't think so necessarily. I mean, this is our application of things, but especially at Pocket Gamer Conference in London, I spoke to a lot of Web2 gaming studios that are now dipping their toes in Web3. And what really surprised me is that the Web2 studios coming into Web3 have a completely different vision of blockchain application than us, crypto degens coming into Web2 gaming. And what they basically see, and I thought this was fascinating to learn, and I've definitely learned some lessons, but they basically come from that free-to-play, hyper-casual mobile gaming branch, which has been entirely successful in its own right. And when you go to analyze the free-to-play game development, it's all about these kind of KPIs. And one of the biggest KPIs that matters for Web2 game studios creating mobile games is the retention rates, right? And they track, when a player installs my game, how many of those are still around after 1 day, 7 days, 30 days, etc. And then based on that retention, they then have a conversion rating. What are the odds of that user becoming a paid user? And the better you can get those metrics, the more money your mobile game, the more successful it will be. And the way they see the blockchain integration is they kind of have this idea of, if we give a user in that kind of funnel some NFTs, whether it's free or whether it's very cheap, it increases their engagement with our game and our brand, because they have something tangible that they own that maybe has a resale value. And that even slightly, that increases the engagement metric. And if you increase the engagement metric, you increase the conversion metric. And if you can use Web3 NFTs to increase the metrics of the free-to-play model, you become even more successful. So that's kind of their line of thinking.
How do you plan on implementing that for Castle of Blackwater? Do you, and does that change any of your thoughts kind of moving forward?
I thought it was definitely interesting, and it's definitely made me understand the value of, in that kind of sales funnel or the onboarding funnel. I now realize that it's important to give away a free NFT, like a free mint or whatever, in that onboarding process. I think that can be very powerful, not only to explain to the user who's new to Web3 kind of what an NFT is, how it works, and give them that free opportunity to mint one, but also, for them to have that feeling of, hey, I now own something that's mine that belongs to this game, so I become more engaged. However, because we come from the Web3 background and we have a much better understanding of DeFi protocols, etc., than all of the Web2 game studios I spoke to, we have that possibility to go much deeper into the Web3 possibilities and really dig out some of the newer inventions, like, for example, using liquidity pools, automated market makers, and plugging that technology, which is only a couple years old, plugging that into game economies, which just, it hasn't been done before. Not many people have been able to synergize those two worlds like we have.
Totally agree. I mean, I think that distinction you make from a Web3 native builder to a Web2 native builder obviously have very different mental models. you mentioned how can we implement what we've learned in the past in the kind of Web3 DeFi space into what we're doing now within gaming. Obviously, as you mentioned before, the game should come first and then the economy should come second. Regardless, the economy or the blockchain will be there to kind of retain users. Can you talk a little bit more about your thoughts on automatic market makers and these different financial tooling that we've learned from DeFi to ultimately help a game economy? I'm also going to be pulling up your PDF here and sharing a little bit of it. Yeah, we'd just love to hear your thoughts first of all, and then I have some questions that I've had once I finished reading the document.
Sure. So to start with, and this is something that I deduced, way back when we started thinking about sustainable economics. The first thing that's really important to understand is that economics, game economics, everything economics related is a zero-sum game. And what that means is that every time somebody is earning money, on the other end of the spectrum, somebody has to be losing money because it has to come from somewhere. And that's the reason why I always knew that, things like Axie Infinity and Steppen were all going to be Ponzi schemes, because everybody was literally making money. And when everybody's making money, that money is coming from new players. That's a whole broken system. What it all boils down to, we realized, is that you have these two kind of categories of players. You have value injectors and you have value extractors. Right. The injectors are the players that enjoy the game, that are willing to spend money to have fun gamified experiences. And we know those players are out there. Otherwise, gaming Web 2.0 would never have existed. That's only value injection. Right. When we look at value extraction, that's the new challenge that has been created with opening up game economies. Right. Previously, value extraction was, restricted, gray markets, etc. It wasn't really a big problem. But as soon as you open up an economy using Web3, it becomes much easier to be a value extractor. And that opens up the avenue for, guilds and scholars and bots and exploits, people just draining your economy as long as there is a financial incentive to do so. So we always knew that we needed to create a system that kind of balances between those two forces. And, when I say value extractor, there is a whole different list of stakeholders that are value extractors with, different gravities. You have a single player that, is a single scholar or whatever that just plays to earn a couple bucks. But then you also have huge guilds and speculators. So there's many more subcategories, but they all boil down to either being an injector or an extractor overall. So we needed to create a system that balanced those two forces. And from a very early stage, I always knew that liquidity pools were going to kind of be an answer somewhere. They were going to have to get involved in the solution. And for those of you who don't really understand how liquidity pools work, they basically replaced the centralized exchange model. On a centralized exchange, you have a bookie, a middleman who takes people's buy orders and sell orders and kind of matches those together in the form of an order book. And that service they provide, which has always been a manual service thus far, they take a fee for that. And back in, I think, 2016, 2017, Vitalik ideated the concept of automating that using smart contracts. And then eventually Uniswap was the first company to kind of popularize that in the large scheme of things. And you have this pool of funds, right? And whoever sets up the pool, they have two asset classes and they put in those assets, and the conversion of one asset to the other from the very beginning, that defines the conversion price, right? Imagine you have 100 apples, you have 10 oranges, and the conversion becomes 0.1 to 1. And this liquidity pool, every time it is interacted and traded with, it kind of rebalances that conversion price based on the difference between the supply from each side. And the more one asset becomes extracted compared to the other, the more expensive that asset becomes. So it's constantly trying to find the equilibrium between the two market forces of buy and sell, demand and supply. And that's a very powerful thing to have in an economy. So, very high level, all we kind of did is we thought, if you create a utility token, which in our case is COBS, and you control 100% of the supply of that, which is very important. You need to control all of the supply. And that's your first asset. And then you balance that against a stable coin, which is kind of the cash out thing that people want. Then you get this economic thermometer, right? Because nobody has COBS to sell. They can only buy COBS. And as soon as people start buying COBS to spend, then the conversion price will go in our favor and the economy will run at a surplus. which tells us that the economy is positive. So all of the tokens that get spent in our token sinks, we collect them and then we cash them out in the liquidity pool ourselves, and we can claim revenue that way. But on the other side of things, when people are earning tokens from game rewards and all they're doing is selling them to the pool and nobody's buying those tokens, then the conversion price goes in the negative. The thermometer tells us that there is an economic deficit. And at that stage, we can take countermeasures to ensure that, we don't spend the tokens that we get. We have this percentage-based payout protocol that starts reducing the amount of game rewards. I'm trying not to go too deep into it, but as you know, it's quite a lot.
No, I mean, it's a lot, but it's super interesting, right? Like I have this pulled up. I think this is something that was a thing that really got to me, which is like your economic thermometer. Like, how can you expect to fix something if you don't know if that thing is broken? And having something in place to be able to know if things are going the wrong way is very much so needed, and also prevents value extraction pretty much at like the core level. If I start selling off all of my cobs and I ultimately end up just getting 0.001 penny, like I might just be like, I'm not going to play this game anymore, or hey, I'm just going to use my cobs like in game already. I think there's a lot more thought that needs to go into this for other games that obviously are currently out there, but obviously like they didn't have these thoughts and mechanics and experimentations today. Can you think about a game that like you look up to that does have this by any chance?
I don't know a single game that uses a liquidity pool in this fashion like we do. So I do know that we're unique in that sense, and I'd love to be corrected wrong because I'm always looking for more examples. Right. I am impressed by some economies in how they solve certain aspects, because all we've now solved hypothetically is the sustainability and the stability of a utility token. But that doesn't solve the whole Web3 economic puzzle. There are still things that I haven't personally solved yet, like NFT inflation and how you tackle those things, how you ensure that your NFT prices are also able to inflate and deflate depending on the player base at the time. One company that really interests me economically is Splinterlands. I think they have a very interesting economic model that does well at stabilizing kind of their utility token. And Skyweaver, they have a no token economy, so they do everything with stablecoin, but they have a very interesting way in which they ensure a floor price of their NFTs by there's like this arena game mode, and every time you want to play the arena game mode, you have to burn one NFT or you have to pay like $50 in stablecoin. So thereby, and that sounds so simple, but thereby they're basically creating a price floor where any NFT that's sold in the market below $50, people will buy it up and spend it in the arena rather than spending $50 of stablecoin, which is a very interesting way to kind of stabilize that price floor. And it also ensures NFT deflation, because people are buying up these cheap NFTs that nobody wants to use and then burning them to play this game mode. So that kind of keeps the supply of NFTs in check as well.
Right. Do you think that the future kind of mass market Web3 game will have a token, and will it only have NFTs? Like, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's too early to tell what will prevail. Personally, I think tokenization is inevitable, just because, taking Web2 gaming as an example and looking at some of the more popular games like Fortnite, Roblox, for example, they all have their own currency, because, and this is a little bit more from the game dev perspective, but having a separate currency rather than a dollar value currency creates more distance between the consumer and the thing that they are purchasing. It also allows you to use some sneaky marketing ploys that leave people with extra currency, so they're more inclined to buy more and spend more. There's like a whole game psychology behind it. But that's one of the reasons why I think tokenization of assets is inevitable, because it has proven to work in Web 2. So why not take that to Web 3?
Is there a Web 2 game or maybe genre that you foresee being possibly the most popular conversion to Web 3?
Well, it is already shown that the trading card genre is currently the most popular in Web3 because it makes so much sense, right? Cards are such great digital assets. They're very liquid. There's a lot of trading going on, and a big part of the Web3 revenue model is based around taxation of traffic, economic traffic that occurs. And when you're trading cards, for example, there's a lot of traffic. So the trading card genre has definitely been the most popular one so far. I think FPS is starting to make a comeuppance. Well, I think like Citizen Conflict, I think is very interesting. We have The Harvest, which is a hero shooter, kind of like Overwatch. They're games that are a little bit more difficult to build, but I think have, you know, a very much a place in the world of gaming. And then, you know, that next level, the games that are being built right now that are going to be finished in 4 or 5 years are the big MMO RPGs. And you've spoken to Uldor, for example, a game that I'm very excited about. I think that's a great example of really taking Web3 gaming to the next level, because, you know, the more, you know, MMOs are based on real world society psychology, right? You have this open free market, player to player trading, and the more you can kind of resemble the real world free market dynamics, the more you can implement different Web3 features, the more economic traffic that you can taxate. The possibilities are endless in that context.
Right. Definitely. I mean, yeah, I think that's something that I'm for sure very excited about. With Shrapnel, I think we obviously have like Shrapnel, who I think won like the most anticipated game of the year recently.
Cool.
So there's a lot of things upcoming. Do you think that 2023 will be the year of gaming, or do you ultimately think that it'll spill over to 2024?
I think 2023 is the year of building, from what I see and hear, and 2024 will be the year of Web3 gaming popping up. Especially when you see the big boys, you know, the Ubisofts, the EAs, they're now dipping in their toes. And, you know, I'm reading stuff like all of the future FIFA games are going to be Web3 based. Some of the big shooters are going to be Web3 based. Like, I think it's only a matter of time before pretty much every game has Web3 aspects, just because everybody's waking up to how interesting it's going to be.
How much do you think that you've thought about your Web3 aspect with Castle of Blackwater? You said that obviously you're working on the game first. You had to learn about kind of game development first. So have you thought about like that blockchain aspect at the end of the day?
Yeah, massively. Yeah, I think a big part of our
I think you're cutting out, Jojo. 1 second. Yeah, he might have dropped. Well, what's up, everybody? I guess we can have an intimate. Oh, I think he's back. Yo,
yeah,
you're
sorry about that. Yeah, my Wi-Fi cut out. What was your last question? Sorry.
that how much have you thought about kind of blockchain, and maybe what are some of the problems that have like arisen, whether it have been, can we find a blockchain dev, what chain do we go on? I think that there's a lot of questions that a lot of upcoming web 2 or web 3 game developers are having that you might help answer.
Yeah, I think I spend most of my time thinking about the blockchain aspect because, you know, like I mentioned, I'm not a game developer. I've become somewhat of a game designer along this journey. So I am very much involved in the game design and like the logic behind it. But once that's translated into documentation and we have meetings, then the game development team kind of takes it away and they're building for a couple of days and then they kind of shoot it back. And whenever I've got that downtime of not having to worry about the game being developed, that's when I keep exploring, you know, the possibilities and the challenges that blockchain has. And you're right, scaling solutions is a big problem that we're currently trying to solve. We're looking at Cosmos app chains. We're even looking at new private chains that are coming out. The onboarding, the frictionless onboarding is also something that I'm eagerly working on in ensuring that, you know, Web2 gamers that want to try out the Web3 version, we don't want to force the complexities of wallet creation on them. We don't want people to have to learn how important it is to store a seed phrase somewhere. We're currently working on an onboarding flow where somebody can click, you know, inventory Web3, and if they don't have a wallet, it'll automatically create a wallet for them and it'll attach them to their game account. So, and maybe your game account is also attached to your social login like Google. So then you have this wallet that's attached to your Google, completely non-custodial, As long as you can log into Google, you can log into your wallet. And then kind of integrating the complexities of handling the wallet into the game user experience. So it's just like sending an item to a player, but on the back end, that's a blockchain transaction.
Right.
There are so many things to solve, and that's what makes it so interesting for us to like kind of feel like we're helping pioneer that piece of the puzzle of something that's entirely new and upcoming.
I definitely agree. I mean, I agree with you that 2023 is the year of building the things that you had just mentioned, from onboarding to wallet flows to like asset management, also are so very important, and like are pretty much not figured out yet. Like there's not really a huge solution for them today in which we can see. I think that there's a lot of people working on it, you know, Sequence, Stardust, a lot of these major players kind of creating these like more centralized solutions, or also just like these non-custodial solutions that are very exciting. I wanted to now kind of pivot into hearing, you know, how do you view Fair Play Collective pushing forward the narrative of Web3 gaming, and ultimately like what you are looking to achieve and accomplish through the Fair Play Collective. And also I'm going to be sharing the website.
Yeah. Do I need to give a bit of an intro into what Fair Play Collective is maybe first?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. So Fair Play Collective is a DAO that we started all the way back in February of last year. Oh, it's almost celebrating its first anniversary.
Oh, let's go.
And it was created for two reasons. One, we were very interested in DAOs, but we didn't want to make our studio a DAO because we feel like we had this kind of artistic interpretation that we wanted to execute upon, and we didn't want to open that up to community interaction before we had executed at least our base layer of foundation. So we really wanted to be more involved in a DAO. And the second thing is back in those days, we were doing a lot of networking, like you and I meeting, and we were speaking to a lot of Web3 game founders that were very much set on exploiting kind of the problematic Ponzi scheme model. And those conversations weren't very productive because they were still stuck here and we were already thinking about, here. But every now and again, we spoke to another builder that, did agree with us and was also trying to solve the sustainability problem, really building that next generation of games. And those conversations were so valuable that by the end of it, we thought it was such a shame that we didn't do that more often, because you meet someone and then you're like, hey, let's keep in touch. But you don't really keep in touch because people are busy.
Right.
So I said to my co-founder at the time, like, hey, how cool would it be if we kind of forced that interaction on a weekly basis, and we'll just do a conference call and we'll invite these kinds of people to that conference call. And every week we'll talk about our challenges. How can we help each other? What kind of marketing are you doing? And what kind of return are you getting on that? Just learning from each other, helping each other, collaborating. And that started off super informal, just a video call between 5 projects. But over time, we started realizing just how valuable that was being, because we were trying to lift up like our kinds of projects that focused on sustainability. And we were trying to rise above this crowd of unsustainable rug pull scam projects. We decided to formalize into a DAO. We have workstream leads. We are trying to grow. We also created a framework of industry standards where we believe that every Web3 game should abide by, just like some basic principles of transparency, being honest about who you are, putting your reputation on the line, about communities being honest and fair, and people being allowed to ask hard questions, because that was always my number one red flag of a scammy project. If you go into the community and you're like, hey, I read such and such in the white paper, it doesn't really make sense, can you explain it? And then it's like you get banned instantly. Like that's a massive red flag.
Yeah.
But you'll notice, and this is like what we audit for. We now have an auditing partnership with Balthazar Gaming, who do the research on all of the projects that want to join the Fair Play Collective. And you'll notice that every project that is Fair Play Collective, if you go into their Discord and ask a tough question, you'll always get an answer. And more often than not, it'll be from one of the founders, like really engaging with you and being eager to answer and kind of help you get on the way. And that really helps define the kinds of projects that we're looking to align with. And we have some really cool partners as well, some sponsors like Merit Circle, Unstoppable Domains, Recently, we added re-NFT to that list. That kind of help us financially a little bit to help spread the message and grow. It's a non-profit organization. All the money that we raise is reinvested into achieving our mission. And we have some really big plans for the future of the Web3 gaming industry, but doing so sustainably with the gamer, the consumer in mind first.
Definitely. What would you say some of those large milestones for the future are? Maybe like what is the 5-year plan for Fair Play Collective, if you're thinking out that far, if not, the 1-year plan?
No, of course there's a 5-year plan. First, we want to focus on membership growth. We want to reach out to as many high quality projects and get them into our auditing pipeline as possible. We want to grow to at least, first, we're now at 7 projects. We want to grow to 10, 20, 50, etc. We're going to be able to split up into different time zone groups so that we can still get the most value from each other. And we want to create a vibrant community of forward thinking Web3 game builders that are constantly trying to help each other, learning from each other, educating each other. Then the next step is to open up that model to the sponsorships so that we can generate more revenue, because once we have a certain treasury that we can sit on, we can then use that money to host a conference. That's like the 3-year plan. We want to, it's a very big, hairy, audacious goal, but you have to have them, right? We want to be, we want to organize one of the first like dedicated Web3 gaming conferences. So think GDC, but then only Web3 games, and only the ones that like are audited, not always the same speakers that are paying for the privilege of being on stage, but giving the spotlight to the smaller indie developer that maybe doesn't have a huge marketing budget. But I find that those people usually have the most knowledge and insight to learn from. And we want to give those kinds of people a space to share and educate together. And then very, very long term, the eventual goal, once Web3 gaming takes off and everybody realizes this is the future, we want to do a token sale, Fair Play Collective token, and all of the money that we raise through that, we want to invest it into our portfolio of audited projects. And in doing so, we want to become the first Web3 gaming ETF, where if you hold Fair Play Collective token, you get exposure to the combined diversified portfolios of our economies that have been tried and tested and improved. That's the 5-year plan.
I love that. I mean, that's thinking really large, but obviously you have to have a big ambition and kind of thoughts for the space to even kind of even get there. What are some of the, I guess, requirements for games to join Fair Play Collective? You mentioned that you have an auditing kind of partnership with Baltasar. What does that look like on the back end?
So if any game watches this and thinks, hey, I'd love to join a network as such, the first thing I do is go to our website and click the button that says join the revolution. That's like the first challenge. You'll come into this type form, a really complicated type form with many different avenues. And only if you click the right sequence of buttons and answers will you find your way into my calendar. You'll automatically, don't give them all the answers, but you'll automatically schedule a call with me. Then, we have 1 or 2 calls, depending on how many we need to kind of get to know each other and learn about each other's projects. And whenever I think like, hey, the first check is right, this is the kind of project that I'd want to meet with on a weekly basis that kind of is in line with the rest of the collective, then they can apply for the audit from Baltasar. There's a small fee involved. It's like a couple $100, which goes straight to Baltasar. After that, there's no costs. And then Baltasar contacts the company to do the auditing. They go through all of the documentation, they schedule an interview, and they're really looking at those 4 pillars and grading on those 4 pillars as well. The assessment, we spent like 2 months working on that with Baltasar to make sure that it is in line with our values. But the company will be checked on transparency. Are the founders public? Do they have experience? The more experience they have, the less, or the more they can get away with not having an extensive white paper. If you're a Web2 game studio building a Web3 game now, you don't need, a 50-page white paper explaining how your game's going to work. It's kind of implied that you know that.
Right.
If you're an anonymous person with no game development background, you better have a 100-page white paper that explains everything that you're about to do. It's kind of like a scale. Then there's a community check. We check if the community is healthy, organic, not just bots, whether people are friendly there, whether you can ask tough questions. We check whether the game is fun. And it's very convenient that Baltasar, the research team consists of a bunch of people who come from esports. So they really understand what makes a game fun.
Nice.
And then finally, we look at the economics, and we understand that there is no one true solution to sustainable economics, maybe except for our own, but that's another topic.
Yeah.
But what we're looking for is founders who, one, understand that the economic model that has been is broken, and that they have some kind of ideation on how they intend to solve or overcome that. As long as those two things are sound, along with the other three pillars, then usually there's no problem, and you should pass the audit.
Okay, cool. Yeah, definitely an extensive um, look into what the game is, but I think it's needed, right? You don't want to just onboard any sort of game onto the collective, because I think the people who are part of the collective ultimately make up the value of what that collective is. I think so far you said you had about 7 games, all really games, exciting games that are looking to push the frontier of gaming. I think all of them are focused on gameplay first, kind of blockchain second. But regardless, having a space where you can have conversations about the back end and the blockchain and how you can utilize it is very interesting and very much so needed. What tips would you give for, I guess, anybody, Web 2 or Web 3 game developer looking to start their own game, if they were starting from scratch, would you say?
It really depends on whether it's a Web 2 game developer or whether it's someone who comes from a Web 3 background and is now going into game development, because they're both out there, right? You've got the crypto degens who had an idea back in 2021, they raised a bunch of money, and now they're like, oh shit, I actually have to build a game. To those
Yeah.
people, I recommend learn how to build a game, learn about all the metrics and the KPIs that have been a big thing in game development, because they will apply. My advice would be, we went down the route of outsourcing game development first. That was our initial idea. Like, hey, we don't understand how to build a game. Let's just get a studio to build the game, and we'll do all the blockchain stuff. We learned quite quickly that didn't work for us. I'm sure it worked for other people, but eventually we ended up building our own team, because having that control, that flexibility, that constant interaction with the game development team really allows you to build a company rather than just building a product. So that would be my biggest recommendation: get the team in-house rather than outsourcing all of that stuff. If you're a Web 2 studio coming into the Web 3 game business, I would say kind of drop all of the knowledge that you think you have about how economies work, and really take like a month or two to learn about DeFi, about tokenization, about NFTs. There is so much more out there in Web3 land that can be applied to Web2 gaming than many Web2 studios can even begin to scratch the surface of. One example, and it's so important to keep up with the recent trends, right? Because first we had the ERC 721 standard for NFTs,
Right.
then you had the 1155, and you really have to keep up with that, because with every new innovation, you have completely new applications. One thing that comes to mind is recently I saw that company Limit Break. Do you know those by any chance? They're quite big. Yeah, they recently devised this new kind of staking protocol where they want people to stake their NFTs retroactively, and that kind of locks them in this pool, and then you get extra benefits, but you can also enforce like restrictive trading in that pool. You can set floor prices, you can enforce royalties, like all of that kind of stuff. The more you keep up to date with that, the more you can really be at the forefront of pioneering with the technology. So yeah, that would be my advice for those two different kinds of people.
That's 2 really great advice. Really quickly on, I guess like Web3 native mechanisms, how do you envision them being implemented in a Web2 manner? Like for me, one of the things that obviously like Axie, I think isn't necessarily the best model of how do you build a Web3 game, but I think they continuously push the boundaries of what a Web3 game can be. For example, with staking of their land, in order for you to stake their land, I believe you have to do an X amount of activities on their land in order for you to stake it or receive the rewards. Do you envision like almost like a Web 2, ification of Web3 native things happening in the future, especially as we start to reach like account abstraction and all of these like things that you had mentioned earlier that people are currently working on?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of intertwining between the Web 2 and the Web 3. And one thing I'm seeing a lot, and it's mostly a tool for limiting speculation, right? One of the biggest problems that Web 3 game has is the existence of speculation, because when you think
Mm,
about it, speculating on a utility token doesn't really add any value to that economy. It's actually quite dangerous because it creates this false sense of growth that can be taken away just as quickly. What you're really looking
right.
for is engaged users, engaged players that actually enjoy the game. So my hypothesis is that we're going to increasingly start seeing these kind of gatekeeping of certain features in the game that provide little bits of speculation, but they're going to gatekeep it based on progress and value. So
Mm,
they're going to say, you know, here's a piece of land, but in order for you to buy that land, first you need to be level 50. So you have to demonstrate that you're actually playing the game, not just buying that land to hold it and speculate on it, because that's bad.
mm,
Um, Another development that I'm eagerly watching is, you know, I'm also part of this DAO called Fog DAO, Future of Gaming DAO, very interesting space. And there's a guy
awesome.
in there who's trying to solve the interoperability problem between
Mm,
metaverses, which is a whole nother discussion that we should have another day. But
definitely.
the short version of the problem is, you know, if you have all these different metaverses that have their own economies and NFTs, then it's actually quite problematic for an NFT of one game to be imported into another game, because it has a huge impact on the economy, and you need to have some kind of centralizing system that controls this. And we've been having some conversations in FogDAO with this guy who's working on a solution where there is this decentralized but central authority that has this all-empowering token, and it's like an opt-in system, like a metaverse gatekeeper or whatever. And any
Mm,
developer or system that wants to get involved in this network of games has to invest stablecoin, and they have to buy this larger token. And every time an NFT is minted in their universe, they have to burn this kind of resource, this combined resource, and then they can mint an NFT instead. And then there
mm,
are like shared properties among games. So like an iron sword in my game has the same amount of resource dependencies as an iron sword in your game.
mm,
And if a player has a sword in my game, they can kind of export it, pay the resource price, take it to the new game. Like that kind of intertwining is much more next level than even what I'm working on with my liquidity pools, but
mm.
definitely where I see the space going in order to get something close to what's that movie called that everyone always talks about when they talk about the metaverse?
I know what you're talking about. It's like
Go on,
the
chat,
thing
help
that,
us out.
yeah, the thing that
Ready Player
reminds me.
One, Ready Player One, that was it.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. In
yeah,
order to get to that, right, which is basically a bunch of metaverses connected somehow, we need this overarching economic power that regulates and controls these imports, exports, kind of like how the real world works.
right. Definitely. What would you say that Treasure DAO is doing a little bit of that?
Yeah, I think Treasure DAO has that to some degree and is a very
Right.
interesting application of it. But I'm going to be honest, I haven't gone deep enough into Treasure DAO to really argue the specifics of it.
Okay, definitely. I do agree though that there is, when you have so many different silos of economies, they're much harder to stand up by themselves than if you were to pair them all together. And if you can do that in a way where it enables them to still have their own economy, but obviously be kind of almost backed by something, is kind of what you're mentioning, would
Yeah.
be huge. But obviously we're still like super early. I mean, I've seen comments that it's like, oh, I can't wait for Web3 gaming to be like the standard in 7 years, sort of thing. So
Yeah, and it
it's
has to be
still.
seamless, right? And this is
Mhm.
another really cool application of decentralized pools, DEXs, and liquidity pools, right? Imagine I have my if I imagine I'm a gamer in my ecosystem, and I travel to another ecosystem with like my digital assets, and I want to buy something in that ecosystem with my currency that really isn't
Mhm.
applicable, then out of nowhere it could create like a decentralized exchange, or maybe there's one existing. I instantly
Right.
convert my tokens to your tokens because, you know, on the other side there's probably somebody wanting to buy that. It's going to be this whole intertwined system of decentralized finance. Basically, that's what it's going to come down to. um,
Mm.
yes, it's definitely an interesting development in
I
this
mean,
space.
that's how our world works today, right? Like we hold currencies of other nations to kind of back our treasury almost. Like it's kind of diversification of economies that uphold one another. If one goes down, then somewhat we all kind of go down. So
It's
there's
kind of
definitely.
how the current system works, but the big problem is that the current system is rigged, and everybody uses the US dollar as like the world currency, and everybody's always calculating back in the US dollar. But when the US dollar can be printed on command by central authorities, then how is that fair to the rest of the world using that, and that's that issue of centralization and that all empowering money printer goes brewer. That's what needs to be solved with decentralization, transparency, limited supplies, etc.
I couldn't have said it better. One final question, which is, what do you think excites you the most for gaming in 2023?
What excites me, especially now compared to a year ago, because gosh, I've been doing this for over a year now. A year ago, there was so much noise, and I even for a time, I used to write blogs as well on Fair Play Collective. A little bit less now because I'm a bit busier, but at the time, I was doing it a lot more, and I was always following play to earn games as they were popping up, and the amount of obviously scammy rug pull projects like Cars versus Thieves and like this baby swap, and I always felt so bad seeing them come up, and their communities were so vibrant because they spent loads of money on marketing, and seeing all those people being so hyped up and talking about, oh, I just put my kids college fund in this, and I'm going to get a Ferrari. It fucking hurts, right? Because we're all in this industry, and whatever they were doing is massively damaging for whatever we're doing. And the one thing that I've really loved seeing recently, and that I'm sure we'll see more in 2023, is a lot of that noise, a lot of those scam projects have left because they're no longer financially incentivized to do so. But 2023 is all about building, and the projects that survive 2023 are the projects that really have something going on. And nowadays, when I scroll Twitter and I'm seeing all these updates from these really strong projects, I get so excited because there are so many intelligent, well-connected, powerful people building the future of gaming that there's no doubt in my mind that that's where the space is going.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Before we end off, I would love to give you a chance to talk a little bit more about how people can get connected to Castle of Blackwater, Fair Play Collective, and ultimately where they can find you as well, as I do believe that the thoughts that you're having in this space are pushing us forward, because we need people like you, new thoughts, new innovations to ultimately find something that works, because we definitely aren't there yet.
No, I appreciate the chance to do a little plug. Find me on LinkedIn, Jojo Meylaerts. Maybe you can write my name somewhere. People will find it's a bit of a complicated name, so it sure beats spelling it. I share most of my thoughts and writings on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter, but that's more of the company account. I'm not personally on Twitter. If you like the Fair Play Collective and you're either a builder or an enthusiast, click the type form, the join the revolution button, and whoever you are, the form will kind of guide you in the right way. You'll most likely find your way into our Discord, where you can join the public facing side where we have talks. Feel free to introduce yourself. If you like Castle of Blackwater, join our Discord, check out the website, maybe even look at OpenSea. We have some NFTs from our Genesis collection. Just, come to Discord, ask questions, come and try our prototype, just get involved, and we're more than happy to show you the way. That's literally what we're all about.
So dope. Cool. Well, to end this off, I really appreciate your comments on quite literally everything. I think that there's still so much more to talk about, to be honest. There's a lot of things that I wanted to touch on, especially like your thoughts on speculation in your own economy, obviously updated thoughts on how we onboard users, but we only have such a limited amount of time. But overall, it's super, again, informative with what your thoughts, your current thoughts, your updated thoughts on and how you're thinking about the space. I think it informs me of what things I should be looking at moving forward and how I should be thinking about the space. And I hope you also, as the listeners, learn more about Castle of Blackwater and the potential of gaming, the potential of Fair Play Collective for the future, because we definitely need these sorts of organizations and thoughts in the space. We'll keep on bringing more interesting guests like Jojo that are disrupting the Web3 gaming space, as it is so very much so early. So don't forget to follow our channels and stay tuned for the next episode. And if you're a game developer looking to diversify your economy, add extra utility to your gaming assets, we have a solution for you. Reach out at renft.io and let's talk about NFT rentals. Until next time, and again, Jojo, thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
Hey, let me take the opportunity to thank you for giving us builders a space. To thank ReNFT for helping sponsor Fair Play Collective and pushing our mission forward. You guys are really on the right side of history here, and it doesn't go unnoticed. And it's these kinds of conversations that help educate, bring the space forward. It's not the first time we've done this, and I'm sure it's not the last time we'll be doing one of these. So I'm internally grateful every time you give me an opportunity to come and preach my truths.
Definitely. I'm going to continue to do it on social media. Don't you worry. And again, we'll talk soon.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.
There you go.
Bye.